Imagine waking up one day in the United States and realizing there is no law. No police enforcing rules, no courts delivering justice, no government agencies regulating behavior. The entire legal system, the backbone of society's order, has suddenly vanished. What would happen if the United States, one of the world's largest, most complex societies, operated without any law at all? Would chaos engulf the country overnight? Would communities band together to maintain peace? Or would some new form of order emerge spontaneously? The concept of a lawless society is often explored in dystopian fiction, but thinking seriously about it reveals how deeply intertwined laws are with every aspect of modern life. Laws create boundaries and expectations for behavior, protecting rights and property, regulating commerce, and ensuring public safety. Without them, fundamental social contracts break down, and the foundations of civilization are threatened. The United States is a vast nation with over 330 million people, diverse cultures, and an economy larger than most countries combined. Laws govern everything from traffic rules to criminal justice, environmental standards to financial regulations, civil rights to contract enforcement. Without laws, all these systems would collapse or become unenforceable. The consequences would ripple through every corner of society. One of the first and most visible effects of having no law would be a dramatic increase in violence and crime. Laws act as deterrents, defining what behaviors are unacceptable and establishing penalties for wrongdoing. Without legal consequences, individuals or groups with power or grievances might resort to force to get what they want. Property crimes like theft, robbery, and vandalism would surge as protections vanish. Violent crimes, including assault, murder, and organized crime activity, could skyrocket. Law enforcement agencies, such as the police and federal authorities, rely on legal frameworks to investigate crimes, make arrests, and bring offenders to justice. Without laws, these agencies would have no authority or ability to act. Police departments would likely disband or become vigilante groups themselves, with some officers possibly turning to corruption or lawlessness. The lack of formal justice mechanisms could prompt people to take matters into their own hands, leading to widespread vigilantism and revenge cycles. In the absence of laws protecting personal safety, neighborhoods and communities would face tremendous insecurity. Residents might form militias or local gangs to defend their territory or assert control, turning some areas into lawless zones where might makes right. Smaller or vulnerable populations, such as children, the elderly, and minorities, would be at extreme risk of exploitation or violence. Economically, the lack of law would be devastating. Modern economies depend on legal systems to enforce contracts, protect property rights, regulate markets, and ensure fairness and transparency. Businesses rely on laws to guarantee that deals are honored and that intellectual property is respected. Without laws, contracts become meaningless, and trust in commercial transactions evaporates. Investors and entrepreneurs would retreat, fearing theft, fraud, or arbitrary interference. Financial markets, banking systems, and currencies depend heavily on legal regulation and trust in the government. Without laws, the US dollar could rapidly lose value as confidence erodes. Capital flight would accelerate as people move money to safer, more stable jurisdictions. Businesses could be forced to shut down, unemployment would rise, and economic activity would grind to a halt. Widespread scarcity of goods and services could ensue as supply chains break down without regulatory oversight. Public services would also collapse. Schools, hospitals, emergency responders, and utilities operate within legal frameworks. Without laws governing funding, labor, safety standards, and operational authority, these essential services would struggle to function. Healthcare access could become limited to those with means or connections, while education systems might shutter without regulation and funding. Infrastructure maintenance and public transportation would deteriorate, further isolating communities. The political system itself would face existential collapse. Laws define the powers and limits of government institutions and protect democratic processes. Without laws, elections could be ignored or manipulated without consequence. Corruption and power grabs would become rampant as no legal barriers remain. The balance of powers among branches of government would dissolve, making centralized rule or fragmented factions more likely. Federal, state, and local governments would find it impossible to operate coherently. Budgetary processes, tax collection, and public administration all depend on laws and regulations. Without legal authority, government workers might refuse to work or demand payment with no guarantee of enforcement. Public trust in institutions would evaporate, fostering cynicism and disengagement. The United States could fragment as regions or cities, declare autonomy, or fall under control of armed groups. From a psychological perspective, the sudden absence of laws would create profound uncertainty and fear. Most people live within a social contract that presumes rules and consequences. When these vanish, the sense of security and predictability disappears. Individuals might experience increased anxiety, paranoia, and social withdrawal. Communities could become more insular, with suspicion of outsiders growing. Mental health crises might surge in response to the collapse of order. Some people might see the absence of law as liberation, rejecting constraints imposed by government and institutions. Libertarians and anarchists might attempt to organize society based on voluntary cooperation and mutual aid rather than imposed rules. However, sustaining such models at scale in a complex, populous society would be immensely challenging. History shows that where formal legal authority disappears, power vacuums are typically filled by force or hierarchical groups rather than purely voluntary agreements. There could also be attempts to establish new forms of order and governance. Community leaders, religious figures, or influential local personalities might step up to mediate disputes and enforce social norms through persuasion or coercion. Private security forces and contractual justice systems might emerge, though likely available only to those who can afford them. The disparity between those protected by private power and those exposed to lawlessness would likely widen inequalities. The media and information environment could also change dramatically. Without laws protecting free speech or regulating misinformation, propaganda, hate speech, and disinformation could flourish unchecked. This could inflame social divisions, spark violence, and undermine any attempts to restore cohesion or order. On the environmental front, the absence of legal protections for natural resources and pollution controls could lead to rapid environmental degradation. Companies or individuals might exploit resources without regard for long-term sustainability or community health. Hazardous waste dumping, deforestation, and water contamination could become rampant, causing lasting damage to ecosystems and human health. Internationally, the consequences would be profound. The United States plays a key role in global diplomacy, security alliances, and economic partnerships. Without laws underpinning its governance, the U.S. would lose credibility and reliability as a partner. Allies might distance themselves or seek alternative arrangements. Adversaries could exploit the chaos to expand influence or conduct aggressive actions. Trade relations would be severely disrupted as foreign companies and governments lose trust in the U.S. market and regulatory environment. International investors might withdraw, leading to a collapse of foreign direct investment. The dollar's status as the world's reserve currency would be at serious risk, destabilizing global financial markets. Security challenges would also increase. Terrorist groups, organized crime syndicates, and hostile states might view a lawless U.S. as a strategic opportunity. Borders could become porous, and internal security risks would multiply. Military forces, while still potentially operational, would face significant challenges maintaining order and defending against unconventional threats. Despite the bleak outlook, human societies have shown remarkable resilience and adaptability in crisis. Over time, new systems of law and order would likely emerge. Historical examples of failed states or lawless periods often end with the rise of new political arrangements, social contracts, or external intervention to restore governance. The process of rebuilding would be difficult and lengthy. Restoring trust among citizens, re-establishing legal institutions, and rebuilding the economy would require coordinated effort, strong leadership, and broad participation. Transitional justice mechanisms might be needed to address grievances and human rights abuses during the lawless period. Education and civic engagement would be critical in reshaping societal values around respect for law and institutions. Innovative approaches, including restorative justice and community policing, might be adopted to rebuild social cohesion. Technology could help by providing new tools for transparency, accountability, and public participation. In summary, the absence of law in the United States would trigger immediate and severe breakdowns in social order, economic stability, political governance, and public safety. Violence and crime would likely surge, economic activity would collapse, public services would fail, and social trust would erode. The U.S. could fragment politically and become vulnerable internationally. However, the resilience of communities and the human drive for order and justice suggest that new forms of governance and legal systems would eventually arise. The transition would be painful and fraught, but history shows societies can recover from collapse, though never without lasting scars and changes. This thought experiment underscores the vital importance of laws and legal institutions in sustaining modern civilization. Laws provide the framework that allows millions of people to live, work, and interact peacefully and productively. They protect rights, resolve conflicts, and create the conditions for prosperity and security. Without laws, the fabric of society unravels, revealing the fragility of order and the need for constant vigilance and commitment to justice and the rule of law. This is why maintaining strong, fair, and effective legal institutions is essential not just for the United States, but for all societies seeking stability and progress. Thank you for watching. If you found this exploration insightful, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into crucial social and political questions.